The Sony PlayStation 2 is the first home console I ever had. I grew up playing games on computers, so the PS2 gave me a whole bunch of new games to experience. This is going to be a list of my favorite PS2 games, so I'm sure my list will be different to yours. In fact, I know it's going to be different. Since I've always had a gaming computer in my life, there are a lot of good and popular games that are available on the PS2 that aren't on this list, because I just prefer them on the PC. Need for Speed Underground 2, Splinter Cell, Chaos Theory, and also Grand Theft Auto San Andreas are good examples of this. I think I do need to talk about those games in the future. Perhaps a favorite PC games of the 2000s video is something I should look at doing. This list isn't going to be in any particular order, so with that said, let's get started here. I remember playing the first Gran Turismo for the original PlayStation as a kid in the 90s in the electronics section of my local Marktkauf. Yeah, you Germans will know what that is. I couldn't get over how cool it was and also how ugly the graphics were. I guess I was a PC snob back then, but I loved how many different cars you could choose from, and that was one of the first games I've ever played that made me wish I had a console, actually. So obviously, the first game I had to have when I got my PS2 was Gran Turismo 4. And what's not to like? A whole bunch of cool cars, most of which I've never heard of at that point, tons of great tracks, and decent driving physics. At the time I got the game, I was also playing R-Factor on my computer with a steering wheel, so Gran Turismo on a gamepad isn't exactly what I would call the ultimate driving simulator, but the driving physics not being super realistic wasn't really something that bothered me. The main reason I like the game so much is that it's a celebration of what makes cars great. It's the sort of game that makes you want to drive an R32 on Tsukuba Circuit and then watch the replay a couple of times. This game, along with NFS Underground 2, had such an impact on me. Before I knew it, I was watching best motoring and hot version videos late into the night, and then trying to learn how to heel and toe in my parents' Jetta. I think it's rare to have a game create so much enthusiasm in a person, so Gran Turismo 4 will always be extra special to me. It literally shaped me into the kind of car enthusiast I am today. And now, I heel and tow all my downshifts. Alright, up next is Disgaea 1 and 2. So I've already talked about those games in the PSP video, but the first time I ever played Disgaea was on the PS2. In case you don't know, Disgaea is a strategy RPG, which is turn-based and also on a grid. I like to call it Japanese chess. This is the first niche Japanese game I ever laid my hands on. I think what I did was search for the best PS2 games, like I googled that, and the first Disgaea was on a lot of the lists I found, actually. I looked up some gameplay footage and thought it was really cool, and I was particularly drawn to how over the top it was and how it doesn't take itself seriously. Before getting this game, I would have never considered playing a Japanese game that was anime themed. I firmly believe that I'd never enjoy something like that, despite always liking the anime art style. I'm glad I gave it a try. It taught me to never judge or dismiss something because of preconceived notions. If I hadn't bought Disgaea, I'd never actually have started my YouTube channel either. If you're one of those OGs who've been watching my videos back when my sub count was in the triple digits, or even less, you'll have heard me mention Okami at least on a couple of occasions. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and I'm actually not exactly sure why it took me this long to talk about it. It's an action-adventure game that plays very much like a traditional 3D Zelda game. The game has a fantastic art style. It looks like a Japanese water painting, or watercolor painting, and the story is based on Japanese mythology. In Okami, you play as the sun goddess in wolf form. Notice how I dodged having to pronounce that name. And together with your sidekick Isun, you try and save the land from the evil Orochi. That's probably how that's pronounced. Like in Zelda, you've got an overworld to explore and dungeons to beat, but unlike Zelda, where you get more and more items as you progress through the story, Okami gives you brush techniques. You can pause the game and draw whatever you need to. It sounds like a tedious game mechanic, but it's not at all, because all you need to do is draw simple shapes like circles or lines. It's very context specific, so if you draw a line, through an enemy, that's like a blade or a cutting attack, and if you draw a circle in the sky, then the sun will come out and will make a day, and while drawing one on the ground or maybe on like some plants or trees will make it bloom. It's really well done. I can't really say enough good things about Okami. It's not a difficult game, but it really doesn't need to be. It's an experience worth checking out, I think. If you haven't. Anyways, the game was ported to the Wii, but I found the brush techniques frustrating to use with the motion controls. They were a bit wonky. The game was later remastered for the PS3, and it looks absolutely amazing on that. So if you've got a PS3, I recommend getting it for that. Let's move on to my favorite fighting game series, the King of Fighters. I decided to put KOF 11 on my list, even though KOF 2002 Ultimate Match has more characters, because KOF 11 isn't available on as many platforms, and it's also the last game of the series that features the old pixely art style first found in KOF 94. I think the graphics and special effects look very good. I mean, they're a bit dated, I guess. That's the main complaint about this, but, well, I mean, I like retro things, so I don't think it looks bad. There are plenty of characters to choose from, and like any good fighting game, each character has plenty of moves for you to learn and master. The music is pretty rockin', and even though it doesn't make any difference in gameplay whatsoever, I think the menus are very well designed. As with all fighting games, I generally play more casually. I usually pick a few characters that are relatively easy for me to play, practice a couple of their moves, and just use those. Let's throw another KOF game in here while we're at it, the King of Fighters Maximum Impact 2. I'm sure there are lots of jokes one can make about KOF 14 and PS2 graphics, but I'm not even gonna go there. Not in this video anyway. The main King of Fighters games might have finally switched to 3D, but back in the PS2 era, it was always a 2D fighter, so having a 3D spin-off was pretty cool. I'm by no means a fighting game expert, but to me the controls feel more button mashing friendly compared to the games of the main series. The graphics look pretty decent, the character designs aren't exactly all that great looking to me, but I can appreciate what they were going for. It's a sort of game that's easy for me to pick up and play and enjoy, so. Next up is Battlefield 2, which is a bit of an unusual one to add to the list for me. Normally I would play games like this on a computer, but back in the mid-2000s, I had almost no experience with controllers. So what I wanted to do was play a first-person shooter on a console so I could learn this new-to-me way of controlling games. I was used to keyboard and mouse controls and joysticks. I never really played single-player mode. It was all multiplayer for me, but I think that's usually how that goes. Back then I had a desktop computer that I just put a wireless card into. I remember buying a crossover cable to plug the PS2 into the computer's Ethernet port. I bridged the network adapters, and there we go, internet on the PS2. I was one of the few who even had Wi-Fi in my neighborhood back then. The only map that anyone ever wanted to play on was Backstab, it seemed anyways. Maybe my memories are slightly off on that, but I remember basically only, or almost always only playing that map. It would have been nice to actually get some online gameplay footage for this, but sadly, as you might imagine, servers for this game are no longer active, so you'll have to just bear with me struggling through this single-player campaign nonsense. If there's one company that consistently makes great games, it's Vanillaware. Contrary to the name, they make very unique games, and they have a very distinct 2D art style, so it's really easy to spot their games at a glance. They're not a big company at all, but they made some of my favorite games ever. I made a review about the Wii version of Muramasa, and that's actually the first video I've ever made for this channel. There's also Dragon's Crown, which is available for a couple of different PlayStation consoles, and Odin Sphere. Originally I wanted to include Odin Sphere on the list, but that's got a great remake on the PS4, so I decided to go with a PS2 exclusive instead. It's Grimmoire. The name sounds a bit doppelt gemoppelt. Grimmoire is a 2D real-time strategy game. Normally when thinking of an RTS, something like Age of Empires would come to mind, but as you can see, this game does things quite differently. It's not isometric like one would think. Everything is arranged in floors, with various staircases providing access to the different floors. There are 4 different schools of magic you learn as you play the game. There are glamour, necromancy, sorcery, and alchemy. They each have their own weaknesses and strengths, so you'll have to use the right ones when attacking or defending against enemies. You have a magic circle called a rune, which you place on the map. That's where you produce units. You can make units that gather mana, which is the resource you need to do anything in this game. And you also get attack units, both mobile and stationary. Each magic school has their own equivalent units. I really like the way this was done. The concept is simple to grasp, and the different schools of magic add complexity as you progress through the game. The art style is very nice looking, and I really like how Vanillaware sticks to their philosophy of making only 2D games. Overall, it's a unique game, and it's one I'm sure a lot of you haven't heard about, so I recommend checking it out. And those are my favorite PS2 games. There's some popular games on the list, but a few oddball ones as well. There's so many best PS2 games videos and lists and all that. And they're always filled with GTA, Final Fantasy, and Kingdom Hearts. But most everyone with a PS2 has heard of those, so hopefully you've seen something new today. Thanks for watching, and if you want to help me make some more videos, please consider supporting me by becoming a patron. And I'll see you again in the next video.